Hello everyone and welcome to this video which is in our Reengineering the Chess Classics series. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler and we're taking a look at another game of Sergio Mariotti, this time played against Mariotti-Savon in the Venice tournament of 1974. I came across this game because, I got into a mail exchange with Gerard the Dutch international master, who is an absolute treasure trove of information about, well, all sorts of weird and wonderful things. And normally talk with him a little bit through Steve Giddins, who was my childhood coach and who knows him very well. And he came up with all sorts of information. And one of these was a tournament report by Jan Timman, about a number of tournaments that Jan had played one after the other, but one of them was Venice 1974. And let me say he wasn't very positive about Mariotti's commitment during the tournament. He was rather stern about that, I have to say. However, he did mention that the game against Savon was very nice, and it certainly is true. It's a little bit on the longer side, and just a little bit sort of complicated strategically. I'm not selling it, am I? But it really is interesting, and there's a couple of really interesting moments. So, and it also features an opening idea by the slightly crazy theorist Gundaram, who again Gerard knows an awful lot about. So, let's see how it goes. So e4, c6, d4, d5, e takes d5, c takes d5, c4, knight f6. And Mariotti-Savon was a Ukrainian grandmaster, I believe. Again, one of those, really strong players, but you sort of say second tier within Russia. But, world class everywhere else, basically. Somehow Mariotti had a pretty good score against these sort of guys. He beat Kuzmin. We saw that game. He beat Timoshenko. We also saw that game. This game against Savon, and then of course he went upper level. Also beat Korchnoi as well. He had surprisingly good results against this type of player. And here Mariotti played the move c5. C5. Interesting idea of Gundaram's. Actually, Mariotti himself was not too impressed with the idea, judging from his comments, but he decided to give it a go anyway. It's one of those moves, I think, that you set up a structure, and actually it's just not solid enough to start with. So black's got all sorts of things to do if he really takes immediate action. But if black doesn't take immediate action, if he just tries to avoid things and play things quietly, then there's quite a bit of sense to it. I mean, it gains space, it cramps black. If you clamp down on breaks like e5 and b6, then there's not that much that black can do. Blacks can very easily just end up in just a bit of a passive position, and that's pretty much what happens in this game. The best moves for black, the engines like the immediate b6. Just to give the sort of the reason why that's a decent move, e5 is also a decent move. It's kind of the move you sort of think of in the modern perspective, I think, always playing actively, break at the centre straight away. And after d takes c5, then knight e4 is quite decent. For example, this is the main line. I've got a stockfish torch and torch stockfish game. Bishop takes c5, and then you follow up with knight c6 and castles, all pretty reasonable for black. But you can try and just refine it a little bit with b6. Obviously, c takes b6, queen takes b6 is pretty pleasant for black. I mean, you've got this isolated pawn to aim for, and you've got very free development as well. So b4 is more ambitious, but then you can just take off and play e5 there. And of course, the fact that there's more air in the position, it gives black things like queen a5 check, more disruptive things for white than for black. The engine's main line was check, takes, d takes c5, knight e4. And then you don't have knight c3 as you did before. So then knight f3, bishop takes c5, castles. And, black's obviously doing pretty well here, really. I mean, nothing wrong at all with black's position. You'll just be very happy to have this somehow. So, I mean, those are the sort of things that black can do immediately, which is why, it's not really such an amazing idea for white. But what Savon did was he played g6, and then knight c3 happened, bishop g7, bishop b5 check, and now not bishop d7 but knight c6. And after this the engines are actually quite happy for white. Actually, what they want to do, they want to play the move h3 here. And follow up with eventually bishop takes c6 and knight f3. For example, if you go a6 in this position, Stockfish was looking to take. Go knight f3, queen c7. You put it in their castles, and you're just threatening rook e1. At some stage, you'll work out how to get your bishop to f4. You've got knight a4 into b6. You've got knight e5. You can play queen d2 and bishop h6. It's easier to find stuff to do for white than for black. I mean, you've got to put the caveat on there that, black is very solid. And obviously, by putting pawns on d5 and c5 and d4, white is sort of not giving him, is sort of taking away some possibilities of making a break in the center, for example. But there are also ideas of, expanding on the queen side like this. It's, quite interesting. I think that Mariotti followed the Gundaram approach with knight ge2 here. It's not bad either. So castles. Yeah, the engine's looking for stuff like knight e4. Just take off on c3 afterwards and maybe try and play bishop d7, b6. But somehow, I was looking just in this position, of course, at playing e5. That seems quite interesting. The idea is to that you end up forking both these two pawns, in this case. Gets quite sharp though, because as always, I have the idea of I could do that, and then the engines point out, but I could also try this, and then I'm putting the whole board on fire. I mean, it feels like black should be fine this position when you've got the two bishops, the king a bit open and all of that. But okay, if the engines are willing to take this on, it can't be terrible somehow. But those sort of active ideas are really what the engines are looking for. What Savon did, he played bishop g4, pinning the knight. Well, f3 was played, not to give the bishop any opportunity to exchange itself, and then bishop d7. And then Mariotti played bishop g5, and the engines just give it 0.28 for white. I mean, basically, black's developed okay, and his position's reasonably solid, but, all of his chances of really doing something active, of, setting white some early problems really have gone. So actually, this move c5 has worked really well. It's been kind of a challenge, sort of, I'm putting this flag down in this territory. Are you going to do anything about it? And the opponent says, no, I'm just going to go around it somehow. So yeah, it's worked out quite well. So now we get into a period of the game where where both sides are kind of manoeuvring. I mean, I think you'd say in general, Mariotti's sort of trying to advance on the queen side. That's basically where he sees the future of his game, and black's kind of just reacting to that, really, not really doing anything super active of his own, but just sort of reacting and trying to keep white at bay somehow. So it's definitely Mariotti in the ascendant here. So e6, rook to b1. I might have played queen d2 myself, I have to say, just to stop h6 and just make sure that pin remains. But Mariotti played rook b1. Savon took the opportunity to go h6. Bishop came back to e3. Engines quite like bishop f4 actually, which isn't silly. Just if you're going to advance with the pawns like this, then keeping the bishop active here seems quite nice. And black can play moves like knight h5, but then you retreat to e3 and you say that knight's worse on h5, which is probably true. It's always a little bit, you always have those moments of doubt, when during a game, simply, where you're sort of saying, am I, is this really good, forcing this, or am I just giving black an extra tempo? But in general, I think that one looks quite good. But bishop e3 is fine, a6, and now bishop takes c6. I mean, in these positions, actually, the engines are getting quite optimistic for white, but somehow nothing much seems to happen with it. I think it's one of those static positions where engines really like the look of it, and maybe a number of factors sort of add up, and they give it quite a high evaluation, but they seem to be able to draw against each other without too much difficulty. So yeah, it's maybe slightly one of those positions somehow. Bishop takes c6, played by black, and yeah, I mean, you've always got to to think about things like this, but in general, I prefer bishop takes c6. You feel like you're going to have a bit more to do with the bishop, really, rather than taking with the b pawn. So b4, and then a very interesting idea from Savon here. He played the move b5. I mean, you could play the move b6 here and just try and put a break on white's queen side just like that. Could get quite sharp. I mean, the engines, this is Stockfish Torch. Stockfish plays a4 and then takes and b5, and this is quite an interesting position. But in principle, the black central pawns are also quite dangerous, and yeah, I like this idea of f5 here. So I mean, it's really sharp position somehow, this, but that would be possible. But Savon's idea is much more restrained. You do have the feeling, I mean, maybe you've seen the game against Kuzmin as well, that there definitely was, a Soviet style in terms of, trying to keep control of positions, not really going into any adventures or anything, always just trying to bring it back to something controlled. And yeah, somehow, Mariotti seemed to do quite well against those sort of players. In a way, slight surprise, because normally, attacking players like Mariotti, they can struggle a bit, well, against players who are expert at keeping things calm. But somehow, yeah, they never managed to keep things completely calm against Mariotti, which I think is really an indication of just how strong he was. So a4 here from Mariotti. I think you'll see throughout the game he doesn't choose maybe the most subtle or refined way of playing, but it all makes sense what he's doing, and well, that's often more than good enough, I think, to play well in a game. The engines just like the move knight c1 here, just to play knight b3 into a5. It's a nice soft square for the knight, but yeah, it's just a square, really. It's not doing anything quite amazing by itself. But yeah, I mean, the engines were... it would definitely look like a nice advantage for white. But a4 is kind of more ambitious, really. I mean, you just want to get at this queen side, start pushing the pawns, and, I mean, basically try and get rid of this bishop and push this c-pawn onto queen, basically. This Gundaram pawn. So... but here we see, this is really, you see the point of Savon's idea of playing b5, that, yeah, when white sort of opens the queen side to make progress, this bishop gets a little bit more space. And what Savon does now, he plays the move knight d7, and his idea is actually to bring the knight round to b8 to c6. So replace the blockading bishop with a blockading knight, which in principle is better. And, yeah, maybe move this bishop somewhere around here. Maybe it can emerge in places like this. It's a pretty good, pretty good all-round plan, really. So knight ac3 played, knight to b8, both sides carrying on with their plans. The engines seem to be a little bit torn, really. Sometimes they go along with Savon in their lines and play the knight to b8 and then to c6. Sometimes, Stockfish or Torch just wants to put the knight back to f6 somehow. So yeah, a little bit not completely clear somehow. So queen d2, hitting the pawn in h6. You always do that eventually, and then queen d3. Quite a nice little subtlety, I guess. I mean, you're pinning this this pawn on g6. You might get an h4, h5. I mean, remember Mariotti always very keen on the h4, h5 things. And the queen, of course, is supporting b4 to b5. That's the basic idea. However, there's a little tactical thing that the engines, of course, are spotting And yeah, maybe queen d3 is a little unfortunate from that point of view, but it's a thoroughly decent move. Savon played the bishop back to b7, which is a little surprising somehow. I think he was thinking that if b5, he wanted to take and then move the bishop to a6 and pin in that way. But it feels a little bit odd to move a bishop back onto a line that's going to be open somehow, if you see what I mean. It's just doesn't feel quite right intuitively, you know. The move that the engines recommend does feel much more normal somehow. Bishop d7, and you're going to play knight c6, and you're keeping an eye on that b5 square. The other nice thing is that if bishop f4, then black can consider playing the move e5. e5, yeah, because we got bishop f5 and bishop b1. I hadn't spotted that one. But actually, it's quite decent for white still. But you know, it's definitely an idea. So after bishop b7, Mariotti played rook d1. Solid move, nothing wrong with it. It's not the main engine move or anything. It might not be 100% useful, but it's super solid. It's not going to harm your position at all. And sometimes it's very good to play moves like that. I mean, it's going to protect d4 in advance against the knight c6. It's also dissuading black from ever thinking about e5 because of the pressure on the d pawn. It's sort of a prophylactic move, mysterious rook move, Nimzovich style. So definitely not going to complain about it. So knight c6 and now knight a4. Yeah, so as soon as black puts the knight on c6 and the bishop can't come here anymore, Mariotti's going to try and make use of one of his outposts, knight to b6. Always, it's like I had made the comment with the knight on e5, on a5 yesterday. It was, or yesterday, a little bit earlier. Sorry, what am I saying? Got a bit distracted there. Those knights that sometimes they look like good squares, but they're not doing that much. But that knight, it's covering the square c8, so it is helping the c pawn in a way. So not a bad square b6. Obviously, with a knight, the closer you are to the center, the better. a5 is okay. b6 is probably a bit better. c5 is even better. d6 is super. That sort of thing. So queen e8 from Savon. Knight b6, rook d8. So, clearly Savon is thinking about playing e5 there. So Mariotti stopped him with f4. And we're getting to a very interesting part of the game now. Because black played the move f6. And, just looking to break things open with e5. And, Mariotti did something interesting here. Can you guess what Mariotti did in this position? I think this was probably why Jan called this, an interesting game, a good game. And I definitely agree, because I think it's a very interesting decision, the one that was taken. Don't see it that often. Yeah, what Mariotti played was the move f5. What is the idea of f5? It's actually it's twofold. First of all, black can't play the move f5 later to activate the bishop. And secondly, after f5, if you go e takes f5, then black doesn't have e5 anymore. Doesn't have that break, so the center and the structure is solid. If black plays g takes f5, a little more difficult to achieve e5. And the key point is that now that you've pinned a pawn to f6, this bishop isn't going to get active. So, it's like, one of the big things about the King's Indian. You've got this bishop on g7 that's passive, but when the centre opens, the bishop cuts across the board. Here, you might try and open the centre. You might even achieve it. You might take on here. But that bishop is still going to be passive behind the f6 pawn. It's going to take a lot of effort to get past that. So actually, it's just a really long-term sacrifice, this one. Very impressive, I have to say. Really very impressive. And... but Mariotti's surprising, but it's why he's such a good player. He's obviously very much attacking based, very much thinking of that sort of thing, but also a lot of good positional skills as well, and positional imagination. There's a bit of everything in this game, which is you wouldn't be able to beat players like this otherwise. So black, difficult decision to take. Black took with the e pawn there. So opening the e-file, I think that's probably what he thought. The engines prefer GF, which does seem a little bit more natural somehow. You know, it is quite a big bulk of pawns, so you feel like you're playing with safety somehow. But okay, not so easy. I mean, this is what the engines were saying. You know, rook e1. We're just threatening knight f4 here. You know, to attack the e6 pawn. Not obvious somehow. So e takes f5 played, and now knight c3. And again, Mariotti, slightly surprisingly, it's not the engine's main line, but the engine's, you know, think that White's sort of doing fine still. Just carrying on with a very clear plan. I mean, in a way, you can say he's forcing Black somehow to make his moves. You know, he's maybe not giving Black all the time in the world to come up with a totally wrong plan. But on the other hand, it makes sense, right? I mean, White's knight, he's making use of this pawn on c5 to provide outposts. And, well, after what Savon did, which is to take the knight off, which is in principle quite decent. I mean, exchange off your pool light square bishop for that knight, which was looking quite strong. Well, I mean, the c6 knight is weakened, its protection, which means that the c pawn potentially, you know, is going to be a danger there. Yeah, I mean, Mariotti just kept on going with it, because after queen c7, just holding the knight, he didn't wait at all, but he played the move bishop f4. Now, the engines don't amazingly like this. They think it's either 0.00 or even maybe a tiny advantage for Black. And you can sort of understand why. Just it feels all a little bit loose, this. The weak pawn on d4, the king with the knight far away. The second rank kind of open because the f pawn is missing. It does feel a little bit loose, but there is that very big idea that the c pawn, you know, could run, and of course the d5 pawn is weak as well. So yeah, you know, quite a complicated position there. So what are we going to do here? Yeah, Savon played the move queen e3 check and just tried to get his pawns rolling. A little bit unfortunate. What the engines were talking about was queen e4 here. So queen b7 and then f4, c6, f3, and, you know, the engines are basically just doing everything to get a draw by perpetual here. You know, the pawn runs, but there's a perpetual because the king is too weak, and yeah, the knight's, you know, all over the place basically. So that was what the engines really wanted. Savon tried something similar, but with the move f4. Now, but with the queen on e3, and actually simply knight takes d5 happened. And yeah, it just hasn't worked very well here, really. Takes, and knight takes f4. And yeah, it's kind of a little bit tricky for Black, this position. So, I mean, you've got rid of one pawn, but the passed c pawn is still there. Your bishop's still a bit blocked in, and there's knight e6, and there's also the open second rank there. It's a rather uncomfortable position for Black. He played the move rook c8, and then queen b7 and queen c4, stopping knight e6, so holding a few things. But then rook c1, c6, queen f7 rather, and c6. You know, and I think Mariotti, you know, was just threatening to take on here, go knight d5, c7. You know, it's very, very dangerous indeed now for Black. So Black played the move rook c7. And now, yeah, these moments are always slightly hard to understand. Mariotti played the move queen b5, which the engines think is a very severe mistake there. He was obviously looking to play knight d5. The engines prefer the move queen b6. What's the reason for that? Well, you are threatening knight d5 again, although indirectly, yeah. But you're also threatening knight e6 as well. So, for example, rook d8, the move in the game, could be met by knight e6, which is quite lovely, I have to say. So that would force Black to play rook fc8, and then we play rook fe1, and yeah, Black can't get his queen to attack the c6 pawn. And, you know, as long as that queen is there, then things are going great. And yeah, maybe after a move like f5, then you play queen b5 and you're threatening knight d5. Just that little subtlety, just to make the rooks passive, give yourself a little bit more time. That was what the engines wanted. After queen b5, black plays rook d8. And yeah, I mean, the thing is, black's going to play the rook to d6. That's the idea. So instead of having the rooks passive on c7, c8, the rook's on d6 there, covering the d file, hitting c6, and then f5 is going to happen. You know, that's the basic idea. So yeah, Mariotti felt compelled really to go rook d1 just to get rid of that rook. But it just gives black some extra time, you know, to attack the pawn on c6 with queen e8, and then get his queen into e3, and now he's attacking both of those. And, you know, it's feeling a little bit like your pieces aren't quite optimal now with white. But of course, you know, the one thing is you've got that pass c pawn. You've got the potential eventually for bringing a knight somewhere into here, kicking the rook away and then pushing the pawn through. Black should be able to stop it, the engines think, but yeah, you know, it's not 100% easy. And here actually Savon starts to come up with a plan that's not really at all what's needed. I guess he was thinking of playing for a win here. He was thinking, well, maybe, you know, I can just do something here. And he decided to transfer his bishop to the a7 g1 diagonal here, so that you're pointing at the king. You know, he's obviously thinking, well, this is going to keep the rook on c1 passive, and then who knows, can I play h5 to h4? Can I do something on the back rank? You know, can I trick this this Italian? But he'd overlooked something really unpleasant here. So maybe you want to have a little go at it. Well, yeah, the key problem is that knight b4 is happening, or knight f4. That was what Stockfish wanted. And when the knight comes to d5, it's going to fork all of black's pieces. And it's just really, it's quite unpleasant, really. It's quite difficult. And, you know, when the knight comes to d5, it's threatening c7. Then the bishop's going to have to stop it, either from a5 or d8. The diagonals got very short somehow. So it's just a bit of a mess, you know. I mean, there's nothing wrong in principle with, you know, with the way that it looks, with the bishop and queen lined up like that. Great stuff. But you're just setting your pieces up for a quite appalling fork, and actually the knight's not far away from it. Just 2 moves and whack. So yeah, Savon played rook e7, now knight d5, forking queen, rook, and bishop again. Queen e1 check, takes, and yeah, well, these are forked, and there's just no way for black to defend them. So black had to go for this rook, knight, and 2 pawns against rook and 3 pawns ending. It's not super easy to win, actually, and I thought that Mariotti did a pretty good job, because it's conceivable. It's conceivable that you let first 1 pawn get exchanged and then another one, and then you know, and then you've got nothing left somehow, because rook and knight versus rook is a draw. Or even you let 1 set of pawns get exchanged and then it's all nerve-wracking, you know, trying to avoid another exchange. Mariotti did it very well somehow. The first thing that he managed to do was to stop the black pawns from advancing too far. So for now, for example, this knight on d5 is stopping knight f4. King f5, knight b4. So we're threatening rook d5 check here. So rook c4, knight c2. Yeah, maybe black could have tried playing g4 here. Might have been sensible. But he played the move rook a4, and now knight d4 check and knight e2 happened. So just eyeing this pawn now. So if you go g4, well, probably we go king f2, you know, and we might be able to establish our knight on f4 later, or play a move like rook d4, you know, and force the exchange of rooks. So rook a6 played, now rook d5, and you suddenly notice all of a sudden that it's getting rather difficult for black to start advancing stuff. The white pieces, Mariotti's organised them very nicely. They're just holding back the black pawns, making them static. So just h3 now, just stopping the pawn from advancing. You've got to watch out here, because if h5, I've got to move like h4. When suddenly your whole structure will be undermined and all your pawns will fall. For example, h5, h4 takes rook h5, and well, you're going to be struggling to stop me from grabbing both of these in very quick order. So king g6 was played, rook c4, just lining up on the pawn there. King f6, and now knight d4. Interesting little switch there. But the knight coming round to f3, and now king e2. And what's the point of bringing the rook in like that? Well, the knight in like that, rather. The knight's attacking g5, so you're going to be able to combine like that and attack the pawn on g5. Just gradually moving your position forward a little bit. So rook e6, king d2 play. Quite an interesting move, that king d2. The king's a little bit on the d file somehow, away from the pawns. And I think maybe that stimulated black to try and do something. He brought his king round to h5, which is a little bit funny somehow, you do have to say. And here Mariotti struck with h4. Rather nasty move, threatening hg there. So rook g6 played, and now king e2. And there's some problems for black now. I mean, if you go king g4, I've just got knight e5 check. Which kind of means that it's not very clear what you're going to do. I mean, rook g8 is played, and then king f2. And, well, yeah, your king's still going to be in trouble if it comes to g4 somehow. I mean, I think that might have been better, but black decided just to wait there. Then Mariotti found something quite nice here. He took and went knight e5. And what is that knight doing? It's covering the g6 and the g4 square. So already the black king is being restricted. Black went king h4, thinking, wow, I'm going to push the pawn, I'm going to get there, boys. But now Mariotti found a really nice idea. Super bonus points if you get both moves, the first move and then the follow-up. Slightly fewer bonus points if you just get the first move. But it is very much a Leela Queen odds thing, I would say. Rather evil. So the first move is to go rook d6, and the threat is to go rook h6 checkmate, which is pretty nice. So black played the move g4, which looks quite natural. I mean, get the pawns up there, maybe get the rook over to a8. Could do something there. But what move did Mariotti find that forced immediate resignation? Yeah, it's this lovely move, really nice move, knight f7. So stopping the rook from coming to h8 and covering the g5 square. So white's threatening rook h6 checkmate, and you can't do anything about it. If you go king h5, then just rook h6 is still checkmate. g3 check, I just go king f3. f3, nobody cares. We just go rook h6 checkmate. So, yeah, Mariotti managed to weave a mating net there with those two moves, rook d6 and knight f7. Very unusual indeed, and quite Leela-ish somehow. I mean, we've been looking at these knights being forwards covering something backwards, and this is very much it. The knight on f7 covering g5 and h6, and just catching a black king from the rear there. Very, very nice finish there. So a little bit of a longer game, but I hope you enjoyed it. There were some very fine moments there. This ending was incredibly good, and I really did enjoy this move. F5. Just looking for it again. Where was it? Yeah, this move. It was way back there. Oh. Yeah, this move 25 f5. Very unusual idea, just to just a pawn sacrifice just to take out all of the dynamic potential out of black's pawn structure. And then that also means, you take the dynamic potential out of the pawn structure. That means you also take some dynamic potential out of the pieces as well, which were relying on that pawn structure dynamism to get active, the bishop g7 in particular. So, yeah, very, very, very nice game, and quite an interesting opening idea as well, So all round pretty good stuff. Hope you enjoyed that very much. Not sure whether I'm going to do another Mariotti game, but plenty more stuff coming on this channel, so do stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching, everyone. Thank you.